Welcome to the Explainer. Look, if you or a loved one have ever trusted a hospital's medical diagnosis, you really need to stick around until the very end of this one. We're looking at a massive fundamental shift in how human lives are actually being targeted by cybercriminals. So let's dive right into a frankly terrifying reality facing modern healthcare infrastructure. Today, we're unpacking how the AI systems that doctors literally rely on to save lives are actively being hunted, manipulated, and compromised.
So, what happens when the AI diagnosing your patient is secretly working for the attacker? I know, it sounds like complete science fiction, but this is happening right now. Imagine an attacker completely weaponizing your clinical diagnostic systems without ever setting off a single traditional malware alarm. We're not just talking about stolen passwords here anymore. We're talking about hackers quietly altering the actual logic a machine uses to tell a doctor whether a patient has a life-threatening cancer or just a benign tumor.
To really grasp the sheer scale of this threat, just think about this number, 192.7 million. That's the staggering number of individuals affected by the late 2024 Change Healthcare breach. This was an absolute watershed moment. It exposed massive, glaring vulnerabilities in AI-controlled Internet of Medical Things, or IoMT devices. Attackers exploited these connected diagnostic systems, pulling off this nasty two-pronged strategy where they deployed ransomware while simultaneously draining sensitive health records. Now, what made that breach, and honestly others exactly like it, so incredibly dangerous, is this concept called algorithmic opacity. Because AI decision-making is just so incredibly complex and basically operates inside a giant black box, it's exceedingly difficult to identify when these systems have been tampered with. This algorithmic opacity creates a huge, dangerous blind spot. It means micro-manipulations in medical AI, we're talking tiny changes to the data that humans literally can't even see, can mean the absolute difference between life and death for a patient on the operating table. And that brings us to a massive paradigm shift. Researchers at the Brookings Institution make the point that major internet platforms are basically acting as unregulated public utilities because of their immense control over our digital infrastructure. Well, we absolutely must apply that exact same lens to medical AI. It's a life-critical public utility, and it desperately needs strict technical governance. When AI is running the entire nervous system of your hospital, the stakes are just way too high to leave it underregulated. Plus, we have to remember that medical networks don't just exist in a vacuum. A hospital's AI-powered infusion pump or imaging machine is part of this massive, globally interconnected web. And this extreme connectivity, that's the core issue here. It turns what used to be isolated software vulnerabilities into system-wide patient safety crises. Literally, a single compromised device can expose your entire clinical workflow to external manipulation. All of this interconnectedness opens the door to a completely new kind of attack. Data poisoning. Let's compare it to a traditional software breach, right? In a normal breach, hackers smash the digital window, grab the data, and drop some ransomware for a quick payout. But data poisoning, that's a long con. Instead of a quick data grab, attackers are slowly, quietly injecting fake or malicious samples into the AI's training data. They're basically altering medical predictions while flying completely under the radar for anywhere from 6 to 12 months. Now, you might be thinking, well, hackers would need to alter millions of records to actually break in AI, right? No way. Breach analysis revealed that it only takes a microscopic 100 to 500 corrupted samples to compromise an entire AI model. And get this, with a success rate exceeding 60%. Just think about that. A few hundred tampered historical patient records is all it takes to drastically tank a machine learning model's diagnostic accuracy. So, how are they doing it? Attackers are pulling this off by actively tweaking diagnostic images, basically tricking the AI into seeing a tumor as healthy tissue. Or they're subtly altering patient lab results. They're even using prompt injection to force natural language processing systems into spilling confidential data. By feeding these tainted, toxic inputs directly into the clinical workflow, they essentially force the machine to spit out dangerous, completely incorrect medical advice. And here's the kicker. The call is usually coming from outside the house. Over 80% of healthcare data breaches actually originate from third-party vendors and interconnected Internet of Medical Things devices. So your hospital's internal security, it might be locked down absolutely tight. But if your supply chain has vulnerabilities, say a third-party vendor's software component is just a little weak, boom, that becomes the exploitable entry point for hackers to get in and poison the well. Defending the AI pipeline, a technical walkthrough. Okay, so how do IT staff and hospital administrators actually defend against these supply chain risks? You've got to implement a phased roadmap for zero trust architecture. Step 1. Implement cryptographic verification. This creates a trackable chain of custody that's going to immediately flag any data tampering. Step 2, strictly isolate your training and production environments to stop any cross-contamination. And step 3, enforce continuous DNS posture management. Let's circle back to step 2 for a second, because I cannot stress this enough. You absolutely must separate those training and production environments. Why? Because a remarkably tiny adversarial attack, altering just 0.001% of input tokens, will completely shatter a system's diagnostic accuracy. If an attacker slips into the sandbox where the AI actually learns, and that sandbox even touches the live clinical environment, that corruption is going to spread instantly. Which brings us to the invisible backbone of all of this, your DNS. Your AI strategy is honestly only as strong as your DNS, and certain obscure misconfigurations are the exact hidden attack vectors hackers are leveraging. They're exploiting dangling CNAMEs for subdomain takeovers. They're using forgotten development endpoints to hijack model API calls. They're even using DNS redirection to siphon contaminated datasets straight into your machine learning pipelines. So, securing your AI means definitively securing the DNS that routes its data. Future-proofing by 2026. As we look toward the forthcoming Health Sector Coordinating Council guidance that's expected in 2026, we've got to get ready for the next generation of threats. Look, if an auditor walks into your hospital tomorrow, there's a strict checklist they need to be using. You have to verify your cryptographic chain of custody to prove data hasn't been tampered with. You need to demonstrate strict environment isolation between training and production. You've got to monitor DNS for stale records in real time, classify your AI tools on a 5-level autonomy scale for human oversight, and rigorously evaluate your third-party vendor incident response capabilities to close up those supply chain gaps. Looking ahead, we really have to prepare for AI-powered attackers who are going to be hunting for DNS flaws at machine speed. We're facing AI-driven social engineering and this really wild looming threat called model collapse. It's basically a phenomenon where an AI degrades into absolute nonsense after training on its own self-generated data. It's kind of like genetic inbreeding, but for algorithms. Plus, on top of all that, we have to ensure our infrastructure is actually ready for quantum computing threats to current cryptography. The landscape of medical cybersecurity is quite literally shifting under our feet. As medical AI evolves into this critical public utility, I'm going to leave you with this final provocative thought to evaluate your own clinical systems. Is your hospital's algorithmic infrastructure truly resilient enough to protect the lives that depend on it? Because honestly, it's a question we can no longer afford to ignore. Thanks for joining me for this explainer. Stay secure, and as always, keep questioning the data.
Quick, fast-paced cuts of the AI/medical graphics from the slide deck. Text on screen is your doctor's AI lying. What happens if the AI diagnosing your MRI is secretly working for a hacker? I know, it sounds like sci-fi, but it is happening right now. Hackers don't even need to steal your data anymore. They literally only need to inject a few hundred tiny invisible errors into a hospital's AI to completely trick it into reading a cancerous tumor as totally benign. So how are they pulling this off? And more importantly, is your hospital protected? Click through to watch our full explainer on the terrifying reality of medical AI data poisoning.